Well, good morning from a sunny Northumberland, where my hair is still getting longer, and time seems to be flying, doesn't it? The Prime Minister has just returned to work and given his first address, as it were, and we are perhaps looking at moving to a different stage in the fight against coronavirus. I hope that you are feeling that you're able to cope in this period of isolation and lockdown. And I think it's really important as we, all of us, cope with the negative things about this, particularly in terms of not having contact, not seeing people, all the people we sort of want to wrap our arms around and give a big hug to, and we can't, and like enforced inactivity. I hope and pray that you still feel like there's, there is light at the end of the tunnel. It won't always be like this, and it will get better. And those of you who know me personally, so long as you're up for it, and some of you are very much handshake people. But for those of you who are hug people, I can't wait to give you a big hug as well, and we'll do that as soon as it's allowed. In the meantime, I hope this series on maintaining good mental health helps you in some way. As I've said before, this is based on a book that I co-authored called "I'm Not Supposed to Feel Like This." I wrote it with a couple of consultant psychiatrists who I got to know in Leeds, one of whom, Chris Williams, I'm sure Chris won't mind me saying, he's an incredibly clever man who is at almost the peak of his profession, and he is one of the country's leading experts in a thing called cognitive behavioural therapy, which is the framework within which this book is written. And today's session, number 6 in the series, is called Identifying and Changing Unhelpful Thinking. Now, you might at some stage want to buy the book. Don't let me stop you doing that. Or you might just want to watch the videos. But this is one of those chapters where it's going to be quite difficult for me to communicate without a lot of reference to the book, because the book uses charts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to suggest that you get a piece of paper, maybe a book, something that you can keep. And then when we get to the relevant points, then you create the charts that I'm going to give you, and then you have a framework. It'd be really useful if you have a computer, perhaps, to create a chart of it, because then you can print off multiple copies, perhaps, and you can use it in the future. Because what I want to do today is to give you a tool to help you both identify and to change unhelpful thinking. And this is based on cognitive behavioural therapy, which is all about believing that we can challenge unhelpful thought patterns and unhelpful behaviour, and we can change them. As a Christian minister, this is why I'm so enthusiastic about CBT, because it says, however I feel, it doesn't have to stay like this. I can challenge, and I can overcome this. Now, that's not to say that sometimes we don't need help in terms of therapy and treatment and medication, and we'll come on to that. I think within the next couple of chapters there's a section on medication and so on. But today is all about identifying and changing unhelpful thinking. So a little bit about CBT, cognitive behaviour therapy. Cognitive means thinking, and cognitive behaviour therapy describes a type of treatment that aims to help you identify and change the unhelpful thinking styles and behaviours that are often a part of anxiety and depression. CBT has a proven effectiveness in treating these problems. It can help you in getting better and can work alongside your Christian faith. CBT is usually offered as weekly or fortnightly sessions with a qualified or accredited CBT practitioner on an individual basis or within a treatment group. The advantages of CBT are it provides a clear model that can help you understand your problems and identify targets for change. And in this particular book, we're using something called the 5 areas model. And it focuses on helping you not only to identify the issues, but to overcome them as well. And this part of the book, we've reached a point where we have already identified many of the problems that we might be experiencing. Firstly, different situations, relationships, and practical problems we face. The impact of those problems on our relationship with God and with our relationship with other people, perhaps in our local church. The way our thinking is altered with extreme and unhelpful thinking styles. The way our feelings can be altered. I'm just wafting a fly away here. Our feelings can be altered as a consequence. We feel low, anxious, or angry. Number 4, altered physical symptoms such as not sleeping or having low energy levels. And then number 5, altered behaviour. We indulge in behaviour that is not good for us. We either become inactive or else we do things that are not helpful to us. So CBT aims to provide us with key information to understand the impact of depression and anxiety and improve not only how we feel by teaching us skills, but also to help deal with unhelpful thoughts and altered behaviour. It does this by asking you questions, and I'm going to give you the tools to ask yourself the relevant questions in a short while so that we can find out more information and answer the questions for ourselves and hopefully learn how to both challenge and alter the way we think and the way we behave. And so this chapter, this session builds on what we've already learned by providing a detailed description of some useful new skills for identifying and challenging unhelpful and extreme thoughts. The key is to make changes one step at a time, with each step building on previous steps to bring about overall change in how we feel. By practicing these steps, we can help to alter the way we see our world, the way we feel about it, and the way we behave within it. So we think about short-term targets. What can I do now to make a difference? Then there are medium-term targets, changes to put in place over the next few weeks or perhaps months. And then there are longer-term targets. Why have I got to this point? What is it about me? What is it about my life that's brought me to this point? What do I want to change over the course of the next 6 months or maybe over the course of a year? And of course, the hope is we won't be all confined in isolation as long as that. So this is about helping us to learn how to challenge unhelpful and extreme thinking. And the next chapter is going to be about practical skills that we can put into practice to change our behaviour. So, unhelpful thinking styles. Just to recap where we've got to. Unhelpful thinking styles involve a bias against myself. In a bias against myself, I overlook my strengths. I focus on my weaknesses. I downplay my achievements. I'm my own worst critic. A second unhelpful thinking style, we put a negative slant on things or a negative mental filter. I see things through dark tinted glasses. I tend to focus on the negative in situations. A third unhelpful thinking style, having a gloomy view of the future, making negative predictions, jumping to the worst conclusion, and catastrophizing. In this unhelpful thinking style, we make negative predictions about the future. I predict that things will go wrong, and I predict even that the very worst events will happen. Another unhelpful thinking style is to have a negative view about how other people see me, if you like, mind reading. I'm mind read what others think of me. I often think that other people don't like me, or they think badly of me, or they're hypercritical of me. Another negative, fifth negative thinking style, unhelpful thinking style, is bearing all responsibility. If something goes wrong, it's my fault. If people aren't having a good time, it's my fault. If things aren't as they should be, it's my fault. It's my problem. And then the sixth and final unhelpful thinking style we indulge in is we make unhelpful, extreme statements and rules. We use words like always, never, and typical to summarize how things are. We make a lot of statements like that include the words like must, should, ought, got to. I must do this. I must do that. I've got to do this. I should do that. I ought to do the other. And that's a good symptom. When you hear yourself using those sorts of phrases, that's a good symptom that you are you have an unhealthy thinking style. Extreme thinking is unhelpful because those thoughts are biased and extreme, and almost always, if not actually always, they are untrue. You see, when we have these negative thoughts, they are not the cause of the problem. They are a symptom of the problem. But they actually become part of the bigger problem and end up having a negative impact on our lives. Our mood drops. We feel more depressed. We feel more upset, anxious, stressed, or angry. Our behavior alters. We stop doing things that we enjoy, that are good for us. We start doing things that aren't good for us. And they lead to a vicious circle of reduced activity, which lowers our mood so that we become more depressed and more anxious. So it's really good. It's really good to carry around with you a notebook, a bit of paper or something, so that when you find yourself doing things, you can make a note of it. You say, what was the situation? What was going on when I did that? And what we call a 5 areas assessment can help us to deal with these unhelpful thoughts, and we'll get to that presently. Remember that thoughts can include memories of the past, comments on the present, and predictions about the future. So it's past, it's present, it's future. Some people, when they are anxious and depressed, notice they have mental pictures or images in their minds that make them feel anxious, panicky, or depressed. And sometimes these thoughts can be very scary. They may include things like a photograph, things like an image, a video. Sometimes these images are in black and white or in colour. Sometimes people, in anxiety, people visualize themselves, for instance, having a heart attack, or finding themselves in some impossible situation. And this is when it really is quite tough. And these things are really what we call panic attacks. We see pictures, we see images of ourselves, for instance, collapsing or having a heart attack. And that's an extreme form of anxiety. So what we're going to do is I'm going to encourage you to think through and to devise for yourself something called a thought investigation worksheet, which we'll come to in a minute. And as you do it, we're going to use the example of Anne and John from the previous scenario that we outlined. We're going to use that as an illustration, and I'm going to encourage you to think about how this works for you, what the equivalent things are for you in your life. So just pause for a moment before we get there, and lots of points in this video you'll need to pause the video so you can do something. So this video will probably take quite a long time to get through because you'll need to keep pausing it and then restarting it. First of all, try to think of yourself back into a situation where your mood altered unhelpfully. For instance, a time when, for whatever reason, you felt suddenly, or perhaps gradually, more depressed, more weepy, more anxious, more stressed, more panicky, or perhaps more angry or more irritable. Try to choose a time that's fairly recent so that you have a really clear image of what happened to you. As you do that, summarize a specific time when you felt worse emotionally. Try to bear those things in your mind. So, particularly try to get into your head this time when suddenly, or perhaps over a relatively short period, your mood altered and your emotions felt a lot worse. So take a moment, pause the video, and just try to think of such an occasion. Now, what I want you to do is to get a sheet of A4 size paper, and you're going to need a total of 9 columns. So if you can, draw a line halfway across the landscape, put it in landscape, by which I mean that way around, not that way around, that way around, and draw a line horizontally across it. And then draw another line just cutting off the top, just across near the top. So you'll have 3 sections going down, okay? Now, so you should have 9 columns, 3 lines going across. So this is what you do. In column 1 at the top, write situation where my mood altered unhelpfully. So when I give you all these titles to put in the boxes, you'll obviously need to keep pausing the video, depending on how fast your handwriting is, or if you're one of these very clever people and using a computer, you still might need to pause it. So box 1, situation where my mood altered unhelpfully. In the next box along the top, that should be having number 1 by the way, the situation one. Box number 2 along the top, altered emotional and physical feelings. Box 3, what immediate thoughts are present at the time? Box 4, what unhelpful thinking styles occur? And box 5, impact of the immediate thoughts. Now we'll get to boxes 6 to 9 later on. Underneath number 1, the left-hand column in the middle box in your page, write this. Think in detail. Where am I? What am I doing? What time of day is it? Where am I? Who am I with? And what happened? In box 2, in the middle section of your page, write, am I low or sad, guilty, worried, tense, anxious or panicky? angry or irritable, ashamed. State feelings as clearly as possible. Underline the most powerful one. How powerful is this feeling? 0 to 100%. And then note down any strong physical sensations that you experienced. Box 3. The middle section. What is going through my mind? How do I see myself, my relationship with God, how others see me, the current events and situation, what might happen in the future, my own body, behaviour or performance, any memories or images. State thoughts clearly, be precise, underline the most powerful, and 0 to 100%, how strong it felt. In box 4, in the middle section, put bias against myself. These are all, sort of work your way down, separate line. Bias against myself, putting a negative slant on things, having a gloomy view of the future, catastrophizing, negative views of how others see me, mind reading, bearing all responsibility, making extreme statements, and if you have a number of things there, put at the bottom, identify the most extreme thought. Then in box 5, in the middle section, write this. What did I do differently? And then reduced activity, unhelpful behaviour, avoidance. What was the impact on myself, my relationship with God, my view of others, how I felt, what I said, what I didn't or didn't do? Overall, was the impact helpful or unhelpful? So, here's the situation. It's 10:45 on a Sunday. I'm sitting in church next to my friend Mary. This is the situation under 1. And you don't need to write this down. It's just an illustration. You can go back and revisit it. So 10:45 a.m. on Sunday, sitting in church next to my friend Mary. The minister has just said, we must all try our very best to fulfill the roles that God calls us to. In column 2, my feelings, I feel low. I feel very guilty, underlined as the most dominant thought. Powerfulness, percentage, 90%. Physical sensations, I had very low energy, felt quite tensed up in my neck. My immediate thoughts in column 3, and of course this is the story of Anne in her response to John. I should have said that at the beginning. I can't lead the group. People won't grow as they should do. That is the underlined one here. Look at what's happened with John. I really let him down. I'm unusable by God. How do I rate the strength of this thought? In this example, it's about 80%. Column 4, what unhelpful thinking styles occur? Bias against myself, having a gloomy view of the future, perhaps catastrophizing, bearing all responsibility. And column 5, impact of the immediate thoughts. What I did differently: I went home and cried. I phoned my minister and resigned from leading the group. And is this behaviour helpful or unhelpful for me? It's unhelpful. I became upset and ended up pulling out completely from leading the group. I really don't think this is what God wanted me to do. So, what I want you to do is, now you've got that framework. I asked you to think about a time when you recently, when this became an issue for you, your mood dropped in some way as a result of some incident or experience. I'd like you to review that incident and fill in that thought worksheet in columns 1 to 5, and give yourself a little bit of time to do that. Take your time. There's absolutely no hurry. And when you've done that, we'll move on. So hopefully you're back. I hope you've managed to do that. If not, please you just go back over this video, and hopefully it'll make more sense. If I've not been as clear as I could have been, hopefully it will make more sense. So now we move on to column 6 to 9. Column 6 at the top, reasons supporting the immediate thought. Column 7, reasons against the immediate thought. Column 8, come to a balanced conclusion. Number 9, my plan for putting the balanced conclusion into practice. So in the middle column, the middle section under number 6, list all the reasons why I believed the immediate thought at the time. Under column 7, answer the following questions. What would God say to me about how he sees this thought? Are there other ways of explaining the situation that are more accurate? Is there anything to make me think the thought is incorrect? If I wasn't feeling anxious or depressed, what would I say? Here's a good one. What would I tell a Christian friend who said the same thing? What helpful things would other people say to me about it? And have I heard different opinions from others about the thought? Column number 8, under come to a balanced conclusion. Use the answers from column 6 and 7 to try to come up with a balanced, truthful and helpful conclusion. Look for a balanced conclusion that you can believe. This should be based on all the information you have available. And column 9, how can I change what I do to reinforce my balanced conclusion? And how can I undermine my immediate negative thought by acting against it? So we go back to this scenario where Anne feels she's let John down and she's decided she's wrong the minister. I'm going to resign as leader of my house group because I'm completely useless. She's had this, she's identified this unhelpful thought. I can't lead the group. People won't grow as they should if I lead the group. So that's the conclusion Anne has reached. And column 6 to 9 are about challenging that. So in Anne's case, here's what Anne would do. Under reasons supporting the immediate thought. I've been feeling cut off from God for several months, finding it difficult to hear his voice. Another reason to support my thought is John's missed the last 2 study group meetings, and he seems to be trying to avoid me. He broke off our conversation quickly. And I just don't feel like I'm being effective. There was that large gap at the start of the meeting where no one prayed. So those are the reasons that would support Anne's conclusion. And then Anne goes on to write the things that challenge that thought. God would tell me, you may feel cut off from me, but you aren't. I love you. Talk to me and to others about how you feel, and I will support you. I should say, you don't need to write down Anne's responses, it's just an illustration. Everyone else has been coming to the group. People seem to enjoy it. There have been some really good times when we've learned a lot and supported each other. If I wasn't feeling like this, I'd say there are lots of things that are going well in the group. I would tell a Christian friend, keep praying, tell others, and let the group support you. And if I asked others in the group, I think they'd say that they appreciate coming. Mary said she really enjoyed last week's meeting. So you see what Anne's doing. She's listing the reasons why this thought that she's identified might not be helpful at all. Now, in column 8, the bottom section, again, you don't need to write this down. It may be helpful to replay it so you can follow the example of Anne. My balanced conclusion is I'm feeling low, and this is affecting how I'm thinking about the group. God loves me, and the others in the group also love and support me. I need to tell them how I feel, not completely give up the leadership. I also need to ask John why he has missed the last few meetings. And when I rate my belief in the balanced conclusion, I put it about 90%. Of course, that's the reality. And now I re-rate my original thought that I'm a waste of space, and it's down to about 10%. And then finally, Anne says, how can I put the balanced conclusion into practice? I won't resign. Instead, I'll speak to my minister and the group and say how I am feeling, that it feels as though I'm doing too much, and at the moment my confidence is low. I'll ask if they can pray for me. 2, I'm going to be realistic. Although I'm not going to resign, I need to do less. I'll ask if I could lead the group just once a month, and ask if we could share out what we do for the next few months until I feel better. And number 3, I'm going to ask John if he's upset with me, and if that is why he missed the meetings. It's best to check this out directly rather than dwell on it all the time. Stop mind reading. I hope that's made sense. So what I want you to do is go back to your scenario. Remember this scenario I asked you to identify, where your mood dropped, you felt low, depressed, anxious. Something happened that made you feel like that. And hopefully you filled in columns 1 to 5. So what I want you to do now is put your experience in columns 6 to 9. Answer those questions for yourself. Again, take plenty of time over it. It will take you quite a while, and just pause the video and come back to it when you're ready. Well, hopefully you found that a helpful pattern, and now if you can keep a copy of that thought challenge worksheet, you can use it on future occasions. Of course, the thing to do now is to try out your balanced conclusion, to put it into practice, to act on what you've concluded, and then to ask, to actually see whether it's true. I think I'm going to leave it there because there's an awful lot in that, and this is going to sort of take you best part of an hour to do by the time you've done the worksheet. So we're going to go on to talk a bit more about the 5 areas and look at the example of a chap called Mark who's been having panic attacks. And what I'd really encourage you to do is to take your worksheet and see if you can apply it to 2 or 3 situations and see yourself perhaps and your thought patterns in a different way. So I hope you've enjoyed, or perhaps it's been at times quite a stressful thing to do, this sixth session on maintaining good mental health. And we'll come to Mark and his panic attacks when we come to session 7. So thank you for watching and listening, and hope to be back with you soon.